This is Actualize Freedom, straight talk on growing clicks and conversions on Amazon FBA from people doing it every day. Now here's your host, digital marketing acrobat, Danny Kenji Carlson.
What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here with the Actualize Freedom Podcast, and today's episode is going to be really useful if you want to one day sell your Amazon FBA business. And even if you don't plan on selling your business, it's really useful to build your business in a way that it could be sellable, because having the option to do that probably means that you have a really good business that you can then just automate or just not have to kill yourself over managing all the time. So today we have on Greg Elfrink, who is someone I've seen around for at least the past 5 or 6 years in the selling Amazon businesses space. He's from Empire Flippers. You guys have probably heard of them before. And he has a lot of experience when it comes to specifically selling Amazon FBA businesses as well as other types of businesses. But specifically, he has a lot of experience in the Amazon FBA space. And he's also on the same side of the world as me. I'm over here in Bali, and he's not too far away there in Vietnam. So really good to talk with someone else in this side of the world. So how you doing today, Gregory? Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for letting me come on. Hopefully I'll be able to offer some value to the audience. And I'm doing well. I am also very happy you're in Bali, because usually when I do these, it's like 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. my time. So this is quite nice. I appreciate you being a digital nomad.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I'm wondering, actually, have you ran into a whole lot of Amazon sellers who are over there in Ho Chi Minh, where you are in Vietnam? Because that is one of the benefits of one of these businesses online, is that you don't really have to be in a specific location in the United States or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of Amazon FBA entrepreneurs, as you know, Danny, and maybe you even did this, is they started as a hustle, like a side hustle on the side of their job, right? And then they have the success and they quit their job and they start traveling the world, or just get rid of their commute, right? So living in places like Saigon, in Vietnam, Chiang Mai, and Bangkok, and Thailand, or even Phuket now is becoming quite a hotbed for FBA digital nomads. And I'm sure there's a few in Bali, but I meet them all the time. I tell people, if you love conferences, like if you love going out and networking with people that are in your tribe, so to speak, which can be hard to do in this space if you're just like in some random town in the USA. But if you come out to one of these digital nomad hotspots, it's like a conference all the time. It's like all the networking without all the speeches, right? So you meet people left and right.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to come out and visit you sometime. But so you're someone who is really plugged into the current state of selling Amazon businesses. I'm wondering, right now in 2022, is it still a really hot thing to be buying and selling these Amazon businesses? I know it's been hot and getting some pretty good multiples over recent years. Is 2022, is that trend continuing to rise, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I am going to be Father Winter here and cool down the heat, because things are they're still good. Like the season of the seller is what we call it. The last 2 years, they're still good, but I think we're at the tail end of the season of the seller. Like you're seeing aggregators start imploding a little bit. Like a lot of these aggregators, they're wizards with spreadsheet math, but not exactly wizards at actual business operations. So the forecasting doesn't line up with what they thought, which is kind of funny, but kind of like what I expected as well. Because a lot of these people think, oh, I'm a master of finance. How hard could it be to run an Amazon FBA business? But the realities of those two things can be very different, right? So we're seeing a lot of the aggregators start shuttering, not like dying, but not buying as much as they were. So to sell a business now, it is much harder than it was, say, even 6-7 months ago. Now, it's not impossible, and I still say it's the season of the seller, even if it's at the tail end, because businesses are still being bought at high multiples, as long as it's a high quality business. So a business that easily sold, say in January of 2021, might have a lot harder time selling now in 2022. But if it's still a high quality business, then you still have a very good shot, because a lot of people want that. And there are still new people coming onto the scene that haven't yet acquired their first business, but they have to make their mandate work, their investment mandate, right? So there's still a lot of opportunity. It's just a little bit harder than it used to be.
Yeah, so can you explain for people who don't know what is happening to the big aggregator companies in the space over the recent months? So for those who are not familiar, the aggregators are, some pretty big funds. They have very large amounts of investor money, usually many, many millions of dollars, where they're just buying up portfolios of Amazon companies and then hopefully growing that portfolio and then creating value for the company and investors, right? But a lot of them been laying off huge amounts of employees and just really scaling things back. Like, what do you think is behind that whole situation? Do you know the dynamics behind that?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I'm still a bit of an outsider looking in, but I can make some assumptions with that. I would think I'm pretty educated based on my position. One of the first things, and this is not an aggregator specific thing, this is an entrepreneur specific thing, which is growth at all costs is often a mindset that entrepreneurs have, whether you have millions of dollars from investors or you're bootstrapping something, right? And this is often a fool's quest for an entrepreneur to pursue. Growing your revenue is great, except for when your profit is like less than 1% of your revenue because you're growing so hard and spending so much, right? And so this kind of mentality can get entrepreneurs in a lot of trouble where they don't realize that growing at a fast pace can be just as dangerous as not growing at all. Because when you grow really fast, when you grow really fast, you're not just increasing and scaling your revenue, you're often also scaling inefficiencies. And so those inefficiencies can become real big holes in your ship that used to be tiny things that didn't really hurt you, but now they're this colossal size that's bringing in all the water, right? So that's one thing that I see the aggregators do, and entrepreneurs in general, and not just aggregators. The other thing that has happened is private markets have become a lot more constricted. And you can tell this by public markets. So you look at the stock market, it's been taking a huge hammer to its all-time highs. Now it's going quite low, right? So as the bubble of everything kind of pops, whenever the public market shrinks like that, the private capital market shrinks even worse. It's just that the public doesn't see it because they're not on a listed exchange, right? So because of that, now aggregators are finding it harder to get funding. And when you're a business that is growing at all costs, that often means you have no profit. And so the only way you can hold on to your people is by raising more money. Well, what happens when that goes away? You can't hold on to your people anymore, right? So that's like one of the things that's happening here. Another thing is the supply chain crisis, which every FBA e-commerce entrepreneur is pretty familiar with at this point, for the curse of the supply chains that's happening around the world. So that has been a huge setback for a lot of them. There's also just rising ad costs. There's also people who are now shopping offline again as the pandemic kind of recedes into the rearview mirror. And then you also have what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, which a lot of people don't realize has this huge ripple effect across the e-commerce community, because that makes supply chain, especially to Europe, even worse. Not to mention all the other uncertainties it adds to the market. So you have all these confluence of events, all these aggregators like heavily competing each other for FBA businesses that have driven the valuations way up, and now they are kind of like, oh crap, we have no money, we have no money to invest. We gotta optimize these businesses, and a lot of them are realizing too, like a mistake that they made, and this is another common mistake I see entrepreneurs make at all levels in their own way, is they hired all these experts from Amazon. And that's great to hire an ex-Amazonian. There's a lot of benefits there. But a lot of those Amazonians are people who are used to an established company, not to the startup culture, not to the hustle you have to do when you get something off the ground. So they're operating with a very different mentality than, someone like, I need to make this campaign work spending peanuts. Like, how do I do that? Like they're not operating with that mentality. So these are all the confluence of events are kind of stacked against a lot of these aggregators. That, and often, not all of them, but a lot of them have no real entrepreneurial experience, right? They come from a more of an M&A finance background than a bootstrap entrepreneur background.
Yeah, that whole thing just seemed like it wasn't that sustainable to me. Just seeing the amount of aggregators that entered the space in a really short period of time. Like, for example, Kenji ROI, we went to this conference, White Label Expo in London, and there must have been 15 different aggregators that had paid for a booth to be at this conference out of like it's like 15% of the entire exhibitors are these companies. right? And we get emails every single week from these companies just asking if any of our clients want to sell their businesses, right? It's just a ridiculous amount of money being poured into this thing. So do you think that it's also bad news for people trying to sell their Amazon business, or do you think that it's kind of the business model of the aggregators themselves that is a bit more of an isolated thing, right? It's not just like no one wants to buy these Amazon businesses, or what do you think? You're the expert here.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that about the exhibitor booths, because on a side note, like they have like aggregators harass FBA entrepreneurs so much that people think I'm an aggregator now at EF. Like even though we're a broker, like we've been brokering forever. Like pretty much all the aggregators are kind of like our children, because the first ones got started by buying businesses from us back in the day. But yeah, like a lot of my FBA entrepreneur friends are just like jaded by the aggregator. Like, stop pitching me, stop sending me this email, these letters, please. But to answer your question, this is like bad news in a sense for an FBA entrepreneur that wants to sell, because these are some of the best buyers around. Like, obviously you got to be careful with them because they're very M&A savvy, and most sellers aren't, because most sellers aren't doing M&A every day. But these people have money. They are usually good for their word. And so that this is a blow if you're trying to sell your FBA business. Now, there are other buyers out there outside of aggregators. Like during the pandemic, for example, we had a small cohort of real estate developers, usually commercial real estate, that sold all their commercial real estate and started getting into the e-com game. Probably driven a little bit by the hype by the aggregators, but those people also have a lot of money and they're buying businesses as well. So there's still people who are buying businesses, but this will, I think, hurt your chances to sell a business at least as easily as it used to be. You can still definitely sell. There's still people buying. It's just harder, like I said, because of what's happening with the aggregators.
Yeah, and to be clear here, just marginally, right? It's not like cryptocurrency where in a bear market, everything is worthless now. If you still have a business that is valuable and it has good profits and is, can show good growth and growth potential, of course it's a valuable business. You can sell it, right? So like, what kind of multiples can people expect at this current point? Like, what's a good range of multiples that people can expect for their Amazon FBA business?
Sure. So EF, we do things a little bit differently. We always value things on a monthly EBITDA. It's a legacy thing rather than annual EBITDA. And the reason why we do that is because back in the day, we used to sell businesses that are like 2-3 months old. So like obviously you're not going to do an annual EBITDA on something like that. But like way back in 2013, 2014 is where that pricing structure kind of stuck. So for your audience, when I say this number is not annual, it's monthly. Just keep it in mind. But the monthly multiple would be between like 36x and 42x of your monthly net profit, or your 12-month average net profit, right? So I say that's still pretty reasonable as long as you have a high quality FBA business, you have really good systems and processes in place, and you're operating on a solid margin, right? That there's room to expand, there's flexibility in the pricing, all that kind of stuff. And you have several SKUs usually helps too. Usually the sweet spot would be between like 3 to 8 SKUs tends to be the sweetest spot, because you don't want to have so many products where it doesn't make sense for the valuation you got. And a lot of buyers, except for aggregators, they don't care as much. But a lot of buyers, especially on the high end, are a little bit more risk adverse. If you're a one product only business and say you're worth like $3 million, like, ooh, there's a lot of risk riding on that one product, right?
Totally. I'm wondering, is there a story that stands out to you of a business that you came across where the buyer or the seller, if they just did one thing differently, then the valuation would have been so much better? Or like just this one simple thing, a mistake that they made, just kind of ruined their ability to sell for a much better multiple. Is there something that comes to mind?
Oh yeah, I come across these stories all the time. So I'll tell a tragic one here first. This was a mistake they made, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about entrepreneurs being all about growth all the time. So we had a business, I think it was worth around $20 million, something like that. All Amazon FBA, and it was ran by 2 founders, and I think they had like 2 or 3 VAs. Very, very lean team. So lean that they were working nonstop. And because they were working these like 15, 18-hour days, like, definitely they've never had a lifestyle balance, life work balance coach, right? They're just going hard at it. They made this mistake where they basically created this promotion of their product that was this best-selling product where you can buy it at cost, and they were supposed to put a limit on it, but they didn't. And so their entire inventory got bought up at cost, and now they have no money, and they're already in debt from their credit lines. And now they have to somehow get all this product from their manufacturer as quickly as possible to not lose their rankings. Well, their turnaround time for their inventory, I think if I remember right, was about 3 months because of everything going on with the supply chain. So you have this $20 million business is basically destroyed overnight, or at least extremely wounded. I'm sure they could recover it over 8-9 months, but now they're not going to be able to sell it, right? And that mistake was purely that they didn't slow down. Like, they scaled up so quickly, they never like took a breather, like, okay, let's figure out some systems here. Let's put some people in here. Let's put some processes and fail safes and stuff like that to prevent that very simple mistake from happening. That was like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of a mistake. So that was a bad one. A smaller one that happened recently, we had a seller, I think it was a 700, 800K FBA business, and very nice seller, very cool business. And she had, we couldn't sell her business because she was still doing all this experimental marketing. So as you get closer to selling, you want to turn off all those experimental like PPC campaigns that you're doing, all that kind of jazz. Because as you know, Danny, I know you run a lot of PPC stuff. Usually when you first start off on like a new campaign, you're not breaking even. You're probably losing money because it's like an iterative process, right? To get to that break even, then to get to the actual profit for most campaigns, I would say. And most marketing fails. So she has this marketing campaign, all these experiments running that are just destroying her net profit. And that made it so we couldn't really sell the business. So she could come back. I think we told her to come back in 6-7 months after you turn those off, and then we can probably sell the business. And that was a simple mistake as well that I've seen people make. The last one I will give, and this is a general one, and this is something we often see. If you don't use a broker like us, then you definitely want to do this. If you use a broker like us, you don't have to worry about it so much because we'll do it for you. But it's just your books, your accounting. Like, so many FBA entrepreneurs have their profit and loss statement completely wrong or just with bad mistakes. And that's really bad because your P&L is like the sacred truth of your business, right? Like, this is the document that investors are looking at. And if there's errors in there, that brings up a bunch of questions like, well, what else is wrong here? So real quick tip, hire an e-commerce bookkeeper, get your books done in accrual accounting, not cash basis. And that could be the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars in your valuation, depending on the size of your business.
Yeah, that's a super important point, especially for e-commerce entrepreneurs. Accrual accounting is the only way you're going to get any reasonable, accurate picture of the profitability of your business, right? Just think about it.
Right.
Like, that company that had a 3-month cycle for the inventory, they're paying the manufacturer and then, shipping and all these random costs. And then 3, 4, 5 months later, that inventory is turning over and making a profit. Then the profit and loss statement on cash would be negative $100,000 this month, positive 300 next month, negative 100,000 next month. Like, it's not going to make any sense. Like, it's useless information. Right. So that is unfortunately a very common mistake I've seen with people. Just, okay, let's set up QuickBooks and how hard can it be? It's not that difficult. I'll just do it myself. And then all of a sudden you have a giant mess, especially because you don't know the financial health of your business unless you have really good accrual accounting, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is one of those things that because a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm included in this bucket, we're highly creative and we're not like crazy analytical. Like, we can be analytical when it comes to marketing tools or something like creative like that because we're into it, right? But when it comes to our bookkeeping, like, I'll get to it later. Oh, I'm too busy. All this stuff. But this is like a pretty important thing. Like, I get it. I get that it's super tedious and it's very easy to put off. But just hire it out. Like, delegate it. You have someone do it for you, right? Because it will give you a much better picture of what's going on in your business.
Yeah, and we will have someone coming on over the next, I think in a couple weeks, there's Nathan, my buddy, coming on to talk specifically about that, like bookkeeping for e-commerce.
Hirsch, right?
Yeah, Nathan Hirsch. He's been on the podcast before, and him and his partner are tackling that problem very specifically. And I just It's very important, and it's one of the biggest traps I see first-time Amazon sellers falling into that can literally bankrupt your business more
Danny,
easily than anything else.
I can't tell you how many times we've had an FBA entrepreneur come to us, and because we build their profit and loss statement from scratch, because there's often so many mistakes in it that we just give us the raw numbers, we'll do it, right? And then the entrepreneur looks at the newer P&L we created, and they're like, "Oh shit, I'm making way less money than I thought." That kind of situation, and that's pretty scary as an entrepreneur to not really know what you're doing, right? So yeah, extremely important.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so other than what you just mentioned, the big mistakes for people, what are some things, let's flip the script, what are the positive things that these types of businesses, if you do these things correctly, are going to just get a much better multiple than the average business that you do? What are some examples that you have there?
Sure. So one that a lot of people never do, and this is a classic entrepreneur thing we do, we tend to underprice our value. Maybe it's like a bit of imposter syndrome or whatever. And you see this with products too in the e-com space where they start selling a product and it's going great and they never test the price. But this can be one of the easiest things you do to increase your valuation. I have a friend, this wasn't in the e-com space, it was in the software space, but the same logic applies. He bought a software business and he literally doubled the price, and that's it. He never did anything else, and he doubled the profit. So everyone was willing to pay for it because the software was valuable enough. It was underpriced. And this is the same kind of thing with your products. Now, the second mistake people make on this is they usually only price test once. So as you know, and maybe your audience doesn't, so I'll explain it. But if you're selling, say, a $20 product, and say you have a range, you look at all the other products selling on Amazon, it goes between $20 and $50, let's say. Now, $50, super high end, that's probably not the right price because yes, you could sell, but your velocity of sales goes down. So the real price might be between $30 and $40. So you're looking for what can you sell at the highest price for the best velocity? Because the velocity is what really matters in a lot of ways. So you're looking for that price discovery, and the mistake that people make, let's say we find out $35 is the perfect price. I'll never test that price again. I'll never do it again, right? You should be doing this at least twice a year because markets change, people change. And as your product becomes more well-known, your product can also become more valuable in that market where they're willing to start paying more. Now you might see $40 is your best velocity because you got all this brand recognition. Everyone wants what you have. And this is one of the easiest ways to increase your valuation, is increases profit. So testing pricing and doing it multiple times, I recommend at least twice a year. The other thing is your copy on your actual Amazon page. This is another very easy change, same concept. You're just trying to convert better with your copy that you have, whether it's with photos or the actual written word, all that kind of stuff, because you can take that same amount of traffic that you're already getting and convert it higher. So these are two of the quick things I would recommend. Other stuff is having diversity of traffic. So if all of your traffic is coming from, say, Facebook ads, and for whatever reason you're not getting any organic or any Amazon PPC traffic that's converting, that could be a real problem. What happens when Facebook's AI algorithm bans you and there's no one to talk to? Well, you probably won't have a business soon. Unless you get that Facebook ad account back up. So a lot of, if you want to increase your valuation, a lot of entrepreneurs think it's all about growth. While that's true in some aspects, a lot of times getting the best valuation is really about how do you mitigate risk? How do you make this business less risky? And that denotes a premium valuation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they get stuck in the mindset, like you're saying, of just growth for the sake of growth. I just want to pump this thing up into the highest possible revenue level so that I can sell it for the most amount of money. But I mean, if I'm someone who is looking to buy a business, I don't care about the revenue level. If it's losing money, right? That's not a business that I want to buy. Or if it's just super, super risky, because that's my investment, right? My investment's gotta be a much higher percentage of a high return than just putting my money in the S&P 500 or whatever, right? It's gotta massively outperform that because of course it's going to be more risky. So it probably has to be, decently low risk, but much, much higher potential upside, right? So I think that's really valuable what you're sharing there.
I talk to so many entrepreneurs. I'm sure you hear this too, Danny, where like you'll be at a conference and like, oh, I did $1 million in revenue this month. But what they're not telling you is that their expenses was 900,000, 999,000, like 999,000, right? Like, so they made like $10,000 a month because they're spending it all, right? Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but like so much revenue, so many times revenue is more of a vanity metric. Like, unless you're like a Silicon Valley VC-backed startup, for most entrepreneurs, revenue is a vanity metric. No, not that much different from like how many followers you have on Twitter. Like, it honestly doesn't matter that much. Profit is what really matters.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that the entrepreneurial space, especially the e-commerce entrepreneurial space, really focuses in on that and really rewards that as the top line metric, because at the end of the day, that's the ego pump, right? That's the thing that people feel comfortable sharing, and is, doesn't show the whole picture, but it shows the Instagram version of the picture, the nice version. We made $1 million revenue, we made $10 million revenue, and I can feel good about myself, and that's it, right?
Yeah,
so
don't look at this hurricane
thing
that's going on behind me, right? With this chaos of all these systems that don't work that I've accidentally built and accrued over the years.
Oh, absolutely. And one more thing I want to touch on that I think a lot of people who want to sell their business they just don't get into this enough is the timeline. So how long typically is it going to take for someone to go through the process of, okay, I'm going to list my business for sale and then find some buyers, negotiations, and then actually closing the deal? What is like a typical timeline for that? And what are the variables and how long that's going to take?
Sure. So the variables depends on the complexity and the size of the business, right? So there's always that factor. But say you approached us with an FBA business, high quality, you have mostly clean books, clean analytics, all that kind of stuff. It'll probably take between 2 to 3 weeks for us to vet it, because we vet everything before we allow it on the marketplace. We reject right around, I think it's 96% of businesses that get submitted to us. So we reject the vast majority of businesses. But if you are approved and you go onto the marketplace, as of right now, our average days on market is right around 29 days, I believe, if I'm recalling. It's like between 26 and 30 days to the moment of you actually selling the business. Now, the job isn't done after you sell, because now we have the migration process. And Amazon FBA is like the worst business model when it comes to migrating it over to the new owner, because it just takes forever and you have to work with Amazon. So that could take an additional 2 to even, I've seen it as long as 8 weeks, depending on how you're transferring it. So there's 2 types of transfers. You can do a product listing takeover, which is where they don't get your Amazon seller account. It's just like migrating that listing to their account. And that takes super long. That's the one that takes the longest. The easiest way is an account takeover, where you actually hand over your Seller Central account and they just change the personal details on it to theirs, and that's their account now. It's usually the fastest way. And of course, you have to loop Amazon in at every step of the way so they don't think something fraudulent is happening, which is what really slows down the process a lot of the times. But yeah, that would be the basic timeline. So to actually sell it, like less than a month, that will probably go up as we continue going through like the aggregators identity crisis moment, as they're dealing with their own existential pains. That will probably extend a little bit. But if you are looking to sell, I recommend hitting up, it doesn't have to be us, but hitting up either a broker or someone who has sold a business a few months, like 6-7 months before you want to sell, to create an exit plan. And that is often a very simple plan to follow, but also very valuable. And that kind of helps you go through phases. As you get closer to selling, you should really take the pedal off growth and put the pedal more on maintenance mode. Like, what can I do to systemize everything here?
Yeah, because your goal is going to change if you're trying to prepare for an exit versus just, try to impress all your friends at the next Amazon conference with a nice shiny revenue number, right?
Yeah, exactly. I always, this is a bit tongue in cheek, but the marketer in me loves saying, the copywriter in me, I always tell entrepreneurs, if you want to sell your business, the best thing you could ever do is become the most useless person on your team. Like, become the most useless person in your business. That means you have a very sellable business, because someone could take it from you and it's like nothing happened, right? Because your team is growing the business without you at this point. That to me is like the perfect type of business to sell. It's a true system of leverage. But entrepreneurs are always like, what's useless? Like, yeah, it's actually a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. So what you're saying is it doesn't take that long as there's no big major problems that need to be taken care of, right? Like 30 days listed like average is pretty fast, considering that it's been vetted and everything's okay with the business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It often doesn't take that long to really get the buyer interest. Now, like I said, things are changing a little bit where it's probably going to take longer. But if you have a high quality asset, like people are hungry for that, right? Like you can't get an asset that can be so rewarding, like buying a profitable digital business, like that has the scalability, the global power, all this stuff that you can do with a digital business. The ROI outpaces pretty much every other investment class out there, including crypto, in my view, because with crypto, it's just like buy it and hurry up and wait. Like maybe you do some day trading or whatever. But with a business, you can it's not unreasonable to 2x your cash flow in a very short period of time. Now you can go buy other crypto. You can go buy more crypto because you have more cash flow, right? So like to me, buying a business is like one of the most astounding investments you could ever make because you already have that market product fit. You already have the traction, which is the hardest part of starting a business. You have that all figured out. So if you have a quality business, yeah, it doesn't take terribly long to drive a lot of interest in it, as long as you're targeting a good audience. Like our buyer network right now has about, I'm probably going to say this number wrong, but I think it's right around $6.7 billion in like investable liquidity that they have. So like, yeah, as long as you can tap into the right buyer network, you can sell quite quick.
So I have a bit of a dramatic question for you. I think a lot of Amazon sellers, their worst fear is they're lining up a business sale and they got it all figured out. They're just about to cross that finish line and sign the dotted line, and then their Amazon account gets suspended. Have you seen that happen? And how common is that scenario where there's a deal, it's lined up, it's going through, and then the worst fear takes it all down?
Oh yeah, it's happened. I wouldn't say it's super common, but it does happen. And the first advice is just breathe. Don't let the stress of this like destroy you, because like obviously selling a business is an extremely emotional event for the entrepreneur, because like a lot of times 60-80% of their net worth is in the business that they're selling, right? Like this is their investment, like this is their 401k, right? So this can be a very highly emotional thing. So the first step is like take a chill pill, let's figure it out. So usually with a suspended account, like as long as it's like not anything really nefarious, you can often get it back. And as long as it doesn't take that long, like, so I have a friend, he had an account suspended for about 2 months, and then, I think it was about a month. And then everything got back to normal. A few months passed, and now he's thinking like, I can't sell this business because of this 1 month suspension. That is not true. A buyer will look at that and be like, okay, that's an anomaly. What happened there? Like your P&L is wrecked for that month. And the buyer or the seller will explain what happened. And as long as it's been like 6 months since the suspension, you're probably going to be fine to sell the business. Now, if it happens at the cusp of selling, that's a different story. That's much harder. I have seen it where buyers still go through with the deal as long as they can agree to not pay out the seller fully or maybe even completely until the account's back up. That's often a negotiation thing you can do. You might have to accept a lower upfront amount even when you do get the account up, because it's now on a shakier foundation, right? And just expect a bigger earnout over a period of like a year instead of like more money up front. So there are ways you can negotiate around it that can work. And it depends on the buyer too. Like if they have millions of dollars like an aggregator in reserve, they're going to be less risk adverse to this, and they honestly probably have a better team to get you unsuspended than you do, so they're probably less worried about it than you are. So there's a bunch of different ways you can slice it. It's not the end of the show just because it happens. It's a bump in the road.
Okay, I think that was very comforting to hear that for a lot of Amazon sellers. You're not going to immediately go bankrupt and die and sprout a third ear out of your forehead. It's still possible to go through.
You never know what might happen there.
Jeff Bezos has a lot of technology. You never know what he's got planned. Well, awesome, Gregory. This has been really insightful, especially for those who plan on selling their FBA business one day. If people want to learn more about what you do at Empire Flippers, then where can they learn more?
Sure. So just empireflippers.com. If any of your audience wants to see what their business is estimated to sell at, you can check out our valuation tool. It takes like 5 minutes. It's an automated range, so it's a rough estimate, but it's based off real sales data from our marketplace, not list price data, but actual sales price. So you can get a pretty ballpark estimate of what your business is worth there. If you want to connect with me personally, you can add me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or just shoot me an email, greg@empireflippers.com. I'm usually pretty easy to get a hold of.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Gregory. It's excellent having you on here, and enjoy the rest of your day over there in Saigon. One of these days, I'll have to get a flight over there and go get me some pho. It's not pronounced pho, man. It's pho for everyone out there. And
we'll get you some bancha as well. Show you all around.
Heck yeah, man. Well, thanks for coming on. And everyone listening, as always, you can find the show notes at kenjiroi.com/blog. And until next time, go out there, make some money.
For show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, visit kenjiroi.com.